Sean Zittel, dealing with a tough voice tonight. This was a subject, and you guys, I'm sorry about my voice. I hope it wouldn't be boxing without a disorganized rush thing at the last minute, right? To speak to Dana White's points about it, but this is something I had been working on during the week and wanted to do it with a little bit more time and with my voice being a little bit more optimal, but we got to go ahead and get right into it because I got sources around USA Boxing letting me know that not Turkey, Dana White, Nick Khan, and Terrence Crawford will be in Lubbock, Texas tomorrow at the national tournament. Now, I know I originally tweeted they're going to be looking to buy the rights to USA National Boxing streaming rights, the rights fees, so that they can, own the nationals and, well, not own the nationals, but be allowed to have the rights to televise the national tournaments here with USA Boxing, which is very wise on their part, trying to make a play for the future of the sport. And so I kind of had to have an emergency live here at the last minute and had to jumble a lot of tons of comprehensive information all at once. And we're going to get into it all in just a moment. And I'm going to need you guys to kind of just walk along with me and follow along. It's a lot of information that's going to come at you quickly all at once. And I hope you guys will be able to follow. So just want to let a few people in here and just say hello and thank you to everyone who's come in. And we are going to start in about a minute. And I'm going to go down the line of 66 slides I've prepared. And I'm going to kind of have to, in order to keep it all organized, I'm going to have to follow a script here that I've put together as well. So without further ado, this is a call to action I have to the big four, or if we're being flattering, the four kings of boxing promotion, which is, of course, Al Haymon's Premier Boxing Champions, Bob Arum's Top Rank Promotions, Oscar De La Hoya's Golden Boy Promotions, and Eddie Hearn's Matchroom Promotions. And originally this video was going to be talking about join or die, a vision I have for the companies that are going to have to stave off the conglomerate known as TKO in association with Paramount Skydance, a merger that just happened in media back in August when Paramount Skydance finalized the merger they had. So it's obvious that TKO, being backed by the Saudi Public Investment Fund, is looking to eventually do what they've done with mixed martial arts, and that's monopolize the sport and have the only game in town. And this is a revolution, a counter-revolution I propose to keep the union of boxing together, which I know has pissed all of us off and had a lot of problems. But I think given the track record of TKO, there's still a chance here at the 12th hour to try to put together something that can offset it, that will make boxing fans around the world happy and want to support the idea that I have. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. Now, all of these companies I am talking about are being threatened, of course, by Turki Al-Sheikh's venture, and let me get ready here, with TKO, which he predicted back in March via Newsweek will crush everything, okay? And what the quotes go on to say is, now he's not just the CEO for UFC, he's the CEO of this new company. And I cannot do anything without the support of the Crown Prince, which of course is Mohammed bin Salman. And they are bringing in Dana White and Nick Khan and all these guys to go ahead and set up this league that, again, he quote said will crush everything. And that includes the four promoters I'm talking about. And I know even a guy like Eddie Hearn, who has his wagon hitched to Turki Al-Sheikh and Oscar De La Hoya, and all four companies. Just recently, PBC sending arguably their biggest star, David Benavidez, to headline over there. From Top Rank to Golden Boy to Eddie Hearn, all of them have sent their talent to make money with Turki Al-Sheikh. But Turki has already said back in March that he's out to crush everything, okay? So with that being said, let's take a look at the valuations. And I know I know part of me here is taking up some space. So you know what? Let's make me a little, no, I don't want to be too small, right? But so that we could read the quotes better, let's go ahead and compare all the companies together. So you see that Matchroom leads the way, valued at $850 million. Top Rank Boxing is valued at $630 million. PBC is valued at $600 million. And Golden Boy Promotions is valued at $450 million. So altogether, the four companies are worth $2.53 billion combined, if we're to believe Forbes magazine's 2024 estimates, right? So follow along. Now let's take a look at what TKO is ultimately worth, the group TKO. Now, on the modest side of estimates, it's $15 to $16 billion, as you can see here. But at the highest, it's valued around $38 to $39 billion, which means that the big four only make up a small fraction combined of what TKO brings to their market value total, right? And again, bear with me here, people. In the long run, what I'm saying is this would appear to be big bank is going to take little bank. The writing's on the wall. These four companies make up maybe a tenth of what TKO is worth. And let's move along here. Now TKO is bragging that despite not announcing who the combatants are for January 23rd, that they have Paramount Skydance and they're the only game in town, right? And recently, Nick Khan had an infomercial with Max Kellerman disguised as an interview where he was bragging about them being the only network hosting American boxing, even though that technically isn't true. I was just at Pitbull versus Roach last Saturday. Amazon Prime Video is an American company, an American network, if you will. So while we don't obviously know the specifics of whatever Premier Boxing Champions has with Amazon Prime, they've only had 6 shows this year and 5 shows last year. The point is, that isn't exactly true by Nick Khan. And so, yeah, that's not actually true. So now let's take a look, though, at what Paramount Skydance is valued at. Now, Paramount Skydance, again, which just merged in August of this year, is worth $15 to $16 billion. So that means the two companies combined, TKO with Paramount Skydance, they're anywhere from $30 to $32 billion to as much as $55 billion between those two companies combined. For comparison, DAZN, which loses a lot of money, and we'll get to that soon, is only worth $10 billion, and it's really propped up by Russian billionaire Leonard Blavatnik. It's not a money-making media company, really. They've suffered more losses than they have gained over the years, but we'll continue on. Now, that acquisition I'm talking about with Paramount and Skydance, it was originally backed by Ari Emanuel, who is, you may know him from the Entourage series as he was depicted as Ari Gold by Jeremy Piven. Well, Ari Emanuel, he's one of the most powerful people now in sports and in entertainment, and he backed this merger of Paramount Skydance. So now, again, here's more information letting you know that he publicly backed the media bid to acquire Paramount Global, okay? And that's part of why you saw UFC get a sweetheart deal of almost $8 billion with Paramount, is because Ari helped back it and Ari owns TKO. And we'll get more to Ari in a minute here. And now some of this stuff may be hard to read, but what's going on now is Paramount is trying to acquire Warner Brothers, aka Warner Brothers Discovery. Now, we're going to show through a few slides here that Warner Brothers Discovery actually wants to sell to Netflix, which is, if we'll look here, actually valued at over $400 billion. So Netflix is the big bank, supposed to be the big bank taking little bank when Paramount is trying to acquire Warner Brothers Discovery. But here's the thing. Paramount CEO David Ellison promised Donald Trump that he would completely rehaul CNN, which, we know, I don't vote, so this isn't about Democrat, Republican, but we know that Donald Trump hates CNN for the coverage they have against him. And David Ellison, who was and his father were big contributors to the Trump campaign. And so what Trump is doing now, you'll see here that Ellison said that Netflix's bid to get Warner Brothers is doomed to fail, and that Donald Trump said it could be a problem, Netflix trying to acquire Warner Brothers Discovery. And we're going to see that despite Warner Brothers wanting to sell to Netflix, Trump is saying he may not let them due to antitrust, which is funny, as he's allowing a company like TKO, which has several antitrust lawsuits, 2 pending, and one they've already paid for $375 million. He's doing what he can to allow them to make changes to the Muhammad Ali Act that would allow them to circumvent certain important articles currently in the Ali Act, like Article 13, which allows fighters to have transparency for the revenue generated by their fights. And we'll get to all that in a little bit later too. But as you see, Netflix, they've won the bid, and they expect to take 12 to 18 months because they have to go through the regulation process to make sure it's not an antitrust kind of case. However, Paramount already is bragging that they're, quote, highly confident in achieving expeditious regulatory clearance under its proposal. Now, the reason why that'll be, and I'll show in slides soon, is that part of the acquisition by Paramount Skydance is being backed by Jared Kushner, who is Donald Trump's son-in-law. And we'll see that Jared Kushner's Affinity Group, which is based in American and Israeli tech, has backing by Saudi, Qatar, and Abu Dhabi to acquire Warner Brothers Discovery. And again, I know this is a lot, guys, but try to follow me. It all connects, okay? This is similar to what TKO is doing, using the PIF, the public investment funds, to price out private American businesses like a Top Rank, like a PBC, like a Golden Boy Promotions, who can't compete with the purses that Turkey is giving them, and so they have to hitch their wagon to them. But we'll get to that in a minute, why that is a long-term plan for them. So Paramount is offering $108 billion compared to $83 billion from Netflix, which would take the total value of TKO, Paramount, that partnership, to well over $150 billion, okay? So it would seem that these four promoters are up shit's creek going up against that kind of economic force, right? So again, Paramount, here's the deal. Now, this is to bring in eventually a model that excuse me. So Dana recently was bragging that now they have all this economic might behind them, and so Dana was bragging that all these promoters will eventually have to do what he does. They'll have to follow the UBO model, and he says, I dare them to stick to the Ali Act the way it is. Well, I liken that in this tweet here to saying, you know, after we make manufacturing cheap in China, I want to see these other companies still make clothes and products in the United States. Oh yeah, that's right, they can't compete with our unethical model, meaning that that's not the flex Dana thinks it is. What he's saying is, they won't be able to keep up with our profit margins because, as we'll see later, TKO pays UFC fighters 16 to 18% of the revenue, while the NBA and the NFL pay 48 to 50% of the revenue. And in boxing, as we'll see later in these slides, they pay 60 to 70% of the revenue to the fighter. So I would liken it to, what he's saying is you in order for you to compete, it's like when America started taking its manufacturing to China for cheap labor. And the irony to all that is that messed up the American economy long term so bad that President Trump has to scramble to make all these big tariffs on countries like China to try to make up for the trade deficit, to try to make up for the national debt. And so if you could follow that analogy along, that's really what Dana is saying. So this is also a model that Dana has admitted will be backed by the Saudi Public Investment Fund. And the public and Saudi right now, whether it's being reported by the New York Times or other articles or other news outlets, they are losing at every turn trying to get a federal case dismissed against the victims of 9/11, who, through discovery in their civil suit against the country of Saudi Arabia, have found out Omar al-Bayoumi was linked to aviation with the Saudi government and helped plot and plan the 9/11 attacks, which would leave the Saudi government partly complicit in the attacks, okay? Which is why the federal judge continues to dismiss Saudi's attempts to get rid of the lawsuit and get it thrown out in court. I think it's important to note that as Dana White is on Dodge commercials talking about America first and all that, and America this and America that, when I'm watching NFL Sunday, that the hypocrisy in that he's talking about pulling yourself up from your own bootstraps. Pulling yourself up from your own bootstraps is investing your own money, or at the very least getting American investors to invest in your company, kind of like he did with his power slap. But he's not doing that with power slap. Instead, he's leaning on Saudi-backed money at a time like this when they're still being investigated for being complicit in 9/11 to fund his foray into boxing, where apparently he didn't have enough conviction to do it with TKO's own money or any American dollars, okay? So to move on, this model that Dana supports, right, is where he says, you know the format, everybody knows the format, the best fight the best. You work your way up the rankings, and once somebody breaks into the top 5, there's no question who the best 5 guys in the world are, and it's to crown one definitive champion in each weight class, right? Now, here's the thing. Dana failed to make John Jones versus Tom Aspinall, as John Jones opted to retire, and before that, he failed to make John Jones versus Francis Ngannou, who Ngannou eventually had to leave to boxing to secure his biggest paydays. So he hasn't been able to deliver, as of late, literally the 2 biggest fights that MMA fans were asking for. And then when he talks about working your way up the rankings and the best fight the best, he recently said this about the #1 ranked UFC lightweight contender. And I know Ariel Helwani covered all of this. And he said he's going to have to work his way back. And who we're talking about here is the #1 ranked UFC lightweight contender, Arman Tsarukyan. Please forgive me. I don't watch mixed martial arts at all, so I hope I'm pronouncing this man's name correctly. But I do know through research, he's ranked the #1 lightweight contender. And what did Dana say? I don't give a shit what the number ranking says. So that's the quote from Dana White. So he doesn't get his title shot next, okay? That is a far cry from saying you work your way up the rankings and the best fight the best. So who is fighting for the lightweight title? Well, technically, it's not even a full lightweight title. So at a time in boxing where we're criticizing the WBC and the WBA correctly, and WBO and the IBF for their interim titles, for having 2 or 3 champions at a time in one weight class, look what UFC has already began to do. Paddy Pimblett is fighting for the interim UFC lightweight title against Justin Gaethje, and that's coming the day after TKO's inaugural boxing card. So even on the weekend where they're trying to have their big announcements in their first Zuffa boxing backed in the United States, not counting Canelo Crawford in September, where they're making their foray into the sport, as Oscar De La Hoya said, it's a redheaded stepchild of UFC, because and it's not just one champion, and it's not the #1 guy fighting for the championship. It's the #8 ranked guy, ranked anywhere from #5 to #8. Now, Paddy Pimblett, again, I don't watch mixed martial arts, but even I can see the push that Dana White has given a fighter like Paddy Pimblett to try to become a star, even though he's received some controversial decisions or robberies, as I've heard, and he's ranked as high as 5 or as low as 8. And so he's the one getting the title shot, not #1, 2, 3, or 4. And this is the fight that they'll be making at T-Mobile, Paddy Pimblett versus Justin Gaethje. And I hope I'm saying his name right. But that's what you're getting. So, again, that's a far cry from the best fight the best and the #1 guy gets his shot at the title first and foremost, okay? Now, to keep it moving, Bob Arum, he wrote out against this TKO UBO model, okay? But actually what Arum did in saying this, and you guys could look up the letter online, he actually said, go ahead and have your UBO. Just make sure the UBO has to follow the guidelines of the First Ali Act. And you've heard guys like Nick Khan and Dana try to say it's an enhancement. But you hear them never say, we're going to keep all the Ali Act the same and add this option for the UBO. No. They always say or. And what that or is saying is it's to circumvent the provisions in the original Ali Act by saying you could either fight under this model or this model. And the real key article in this that Arum points out is Articles 5 and 13, but 13 is the one that means you have to have transparency with the fighter pay to the fighter's manager, which is not supposed to be aligned with the promoter, which is what TKO is trying to do. Have the manager and the promoter control the rankings, control the belt, and control the fighters. So Arum spoke out against that. And here's the proof in the pudding, okay? As you'll see right here, UFC fighters, they generate about they get to keep about 16 to 18% of the total UFC revenue. So obviously they don't want to keep Article 13 in their UBO because they would ideally like to keep the pay scale for boxing the same it is at UFC. They already have a couple of antitrust suits pending along with the one they've already paid out. And if they pay boxers more than they pay the UFC, if they have to pay boxers closer to what you see here at the bottom of the screen of this screenshot, 48 to 50% like it is in the NBA and NFL, that means another lawsuit will come, and eventually they'll have to up the pay of UFC revenue, probably to the same of whatever they'd pay the boxers. So rather than do that, they would rather get the boxers into the same kind of situation they have their UFC fighters in, even though this company actually makes enough money, to their credit, to where they could rise the fighter pay in both UFC and their eventual Zuffa boxing league to 50% and still make tons of money. So now here's what fighters are making. Again, you saw that in the NBA and NFL that they make 48 to 50%. Now in boxing, they get to keep 60 to 70%. And the problem with that has been, in boxing, meanwhile, all of its fights have been on DAZN, but let me get to that in a second. So TKO is wisely weaponizing that it started with Al Haymon when he got the Waddell and Reed investment fund, started overpaying fighters. Then it carried over to Eddie Hearn's DAZN venture in 2018. When he started overpaying fighters to try to get talent. And TKO is wisely weaponizing that fact against the infrastructure of boxing and saying, see what happens when that happens, and see what a well-oiled machine we have when we're able to keep our fighters paid for less and run the company first, fighters second. So I understand that. But right now, all the fights are happening on DAZN, right? And fighters are being fighting for inflated market value, like Teofimo Lopez versus Shakur Stevenson, which I'm hearing they're both making, close to, well, I won't disclose that, but they're making above market value, both of them, right? And what that's doing is the American promoters have to have their fighters on DAZN, which, as you see here, is not a money-making platform that gets a whole lot of eyeballs compared to some of these other more mainstream platforms. And that's why DAZN has recorded losses in the billions year after year. So the sports premier fighters are behind this paywall on DAZN, where it's not getting the most visibility, and fighters are fighting, because of Turki Al-Sheikh now more than ever, above market value. So, but here's what I question. To the promoters like Eddie and Oscar and Bob and even Al Haymon last month, sending Benavidez over there, is at what point will DAZN, which hemorrhages money, and the Public Investment Fund, which is hemorrhaging money, at what point will they stop doing that? And I almost think it is a conspiracy of sorts. I think TKO is allowing the Saudi Public Investment Fund to drive out all private competitors to where they can't compete with these purses. And eventually, when DAZN and the Public Investment Fund are done hemorrhaging money, because if you look here, they are not generating the crowds in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, for these boxing events that Riyadh season is spending all this money on. So at some point, you can expect Mohammed bin Salman to cut the water from that well dry, because it's not making money and it's losing them money, and it's not really attracting the tourism to Saudi Arabia that they would hope. So, again, even their events in America, now I think possibly Canelo Crawford may have turned a profit, possibly. But when you look at Crawford versus Madrimov last year, it was reported they lost at least over $10 million on that event. And again, between them not really drawing crowds in Saudi and events like Crawford Madrimov hemorrhaging them money, how much longer will they be okay just overpaying fighters until the point where TKO can take over a dead market in the US and buy up everyone for cheap? And that is why TKO is attending the Nationals tomorrow. They know the long play is to get all the young fighters coming out of USA Boxing, the same program that made Sugar Ray Leonard, Oscar De La Hoya, Muhammad Ali, Floyd Mayweather, and all of them, and get them under this umbrella where they're going to be tied into those UBO contracts for the long term, and that's how they can run it like they do the UFC. So, yeah, there you go. Now, again, Saudi has acquired a part of DAZN, but again, DAZN is hemorrhaging money. So, Turkey now, and more evidence that things aren't going well financially with these investments is, you'll remember Turkey declared earlier this year an end to pay-per-view model for Riyadh season and Ring Magazine events, but not only has that not happened, DAZN has seen multiple price increases in the last year or so. At a time where, so not only was he not able to make good on his promise that he would end pay-per-view for his fights, he's actually asking you for more money than ever because DAZN, which the Public Investment Fund owns a stake in alongside Leonard Blavatnik, they're rising their monthly prices and they're still asking you to buy the pay-per-view. So that's what I mean. That's a sign that they want to find a way to get this thing to make some money instead of continuing to lose money, because even though Saudi has all the money in the world, nobody likes to keep losing millions and millions and millions of dollars. So, and again, this is a problem we have. We just saw at that fight, I mentioned Shakur and Teofimo, Richardson Hitchens and Keyshawn Davis going back and forth. I would love to see that fight, right? But my man Tim Bradley reported, and Richardson Hitchens confirmed on Twitter, that they priced themselves out of it. And this is a problem in boxing, and this is a problem that TKO is weaponizing very wisely, just as they're very wise to go to the Nationals tomorrow. They're saying, see what happens when a bleeding heart like me is trying to say, we'll give the fighters at least half the revenue that the pot makes, and they go, yeah, but then you get the infrastructure you're left with, a going out of business sale, right? And you get spoiled fighters who don't want to fight for what they're worth or even slightly above their market value. They want a Turkey Al-Sheikh, Eddie Hearn fresh with DAZN, or Al Haymon with the Waddell and Reed money, or whoever, or they'd want ESPN when they had $90 million a year from ESPN to pay them above market value. And that's what puts us in the situation we're in to a degree, right? Now, so now we're left, who is out there to offset potentially a $160 billion conglomerate if Paramount is able to acquire Warner Brothers Discovery along with TKO, which is valued anywhere from 15 to, like I said, 38 to $39 billion. Altogether, well over $150 billion if Paramount Skydance can acquire Warner Brothers Discovery. What big bank could take that little bank on? And I have an answer for you. Amazon, which already is hosting boxing in America, okay? Amazon is worth almost $2.5 trillion. That's enough money. Let me get to my notes here to make sure we don't get lost here. So, one moment, please. Amazon, which is a bigger company than all of them, right? Now, Amazon Prime Video is only valued right now at about $16 billion because Jeff Bezos has just began to invest in the NFL, invest in the NBA, invest in live sports. And if you ask me, with really good production value, I think Amazon Prime, the football games, the NFL games, and the basketball games are really good. I like the production. I like everything about it so far. Not just saying that here to make a point. And so it stands to reason, and we'll get into a lot of reasons why Amazon and Jeff Bezos can play fire with these people. And let's get into why he would do that. So as you see here, Amazon is the 5th biggest company in the world. Now scroll on down, you'll see on your screen here, 6, 7, 8. At 8th is Saudi Aramco. Now Saudi Aramco is the only non-tech company in the top 10. It's the state-owned oil and gas giant of Saudi Arabia, valued at $1.57 trillion. So that's the big bank nobody can take on in America, right? Except Jeff Bezos. Jeff Bezos has over almost $1 trillion more to Amazon's name. Now, it gets deep here because Jeff Bezos owned the Washington Post. And guess who worked for the Washington Post? Jamal Khashoggi. Jamal Khashoggi was murdered, as you'll read right here on Wikipedia, at the behest of the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. So you have Jeff Bezos here, who has some history with the Saudi government. He owned Washington Post, and his journalist was murdered, and reportedly Jeff Bezos was very upset about that. So there's some history here. There you go right there. Back in August of 2013, Bezos purchased the Washington Post, okay? Now, let's take a look at the relationship between Trump and Bezos, which this year has gotten a little bit better upon Trump winning again. Trump has praised Jeff Bezos for overturning and changing some of the leadership at Washington Post, and he feels the Washington Post is not as critical or biased against them. It's not as fake news as he would call it. But still, you could read here, the relationship between Jeff Bezos and Donald Trump has been tumultuous, characterized by public criticism and political clashes, particularly concerning Bezos' ownership of the Washington Post and Amazon's business dealings. Now, contrast that with TKO's ownership, which has Trump in their pocket and vice versa. Ari Emanuel, as I'll show you later, was Donald Trump's agent, and Dana White is very close with President Trump. So you have TKO or Paramount trying to go after all the media rights and become the biggest media rights holder in America by going over, really competing with a company like Disney by acquiring Warner Brothers Discovery for $108 billion. And that means they're in direct competition in the media space with Amazon Prime Video, and they stand in contrast in relationship to Donald Trump. So why would Bezos give a shit about getting into boxing? Well, beyond the personal reason, this is a chance for him to compete against a group backed by Saudi and Paramount and Jared Kushner trying to acquire more capital in the media space. But why would he? So okay, he's going to lose some money, like Saudi's losing money to go back and forth in a media war against them. Well, let's not forget that boxing, even without a well-oiled machine like Amazon Prime, while the UFC, to their credit, has a well-oiled machine and has for years, despite that, when you look at the highest rated pay-per-views in combat sports history, 8 out of the 12 happened in the boxing ring, okay? And the top 3 happened in boxing. 4 of the top 5 happened in boxing. So that shows, even with boxing being dysfunctional, even with the 4 sanctioning bodies, even without USA Boxing receiving any resources from the promoters and the money and the pros, somehow this sport has the intrinsic value to, at the highest level, still outgross UFC on its biggest nights when things actually come together the way they're supposed to. Now let's take a look at the biggest gates of all time, okay? The top 5 are all in boxing, like I told Dana in September. And they come in the last 10 years. So we're not going back to the Mike Tyson glory days. We're not going back to Leonard Hearns. We're not going back to Muhammad Ali or Tyson Holyfield. In the last 10 years in combat sports history, boxing still has the top 5 gates of all time. Now, right behind it are, in the next 5, only one UFC event, UFC Noche, which, to point out, part of why the gate was so high is the Sphere cost so much to have a show there that inflated the ticket prices. It's not because that is one of the biggest UFC fights of all time. On the contrary, Conor McGregor, Ronda Rousey, those were bigger fights than, I believe it was Sean O'Malley who headlined that night. So anyway, point being, UFC comes in at 7th, and that's its lone figure in the top 10 gates in combat sports history all time, okay? So 9 of the top 10 happen in boxing. So if you're Jeff Bezos, if you could get the 4 promoters together, Hearn, Arum, Haymon, and De La Hoya, and actually have, and I'll get to my what I think they need to do later, which is kind of have an HBO in its prime kind of model. Remember, HBO boxing, each promoter is split it off. Eddie Hearn has his Matchroom shows. PBC literally calls it Premier Boxing Champions. When ESPN was on Top Rank, it was Top Rank on ESPN, so on and so forth with Golden Boy and DAZN. HBO, what made it great was it was just called World Championship Boxing. It didn't belong to any single promoter. Don King, main events with the Duvas, Bob Arum's Top Rank, and smaller promoters like Gary Shaw, anybody who had talent, they would fight under this one umbrella, the home of boxing, right? So I think this can happen on Amazon Prime. So, and also, Now that would be asking Jeff Bezos to lose some money in the interim, because he would have to offset paying above market value by someone like the Saudi Public Investment Fund, the government of Saudi Arabia, which murdered his journalist Jamal Khashoggi, according to our own government's intelligence. But, I'm a gamer, and there's a precedent for this kind of thing. Sony, which has dominated the console, well, Nintendo is ever since Nintendo did the Switch, they're right neck and neck with Sony, if not beating them. But point being, Sony has actually sold much of the PlayStation from PlayStation 2 onward at a loss for a time, and until later on, because right here, Sony had to sell the PS5 at a loss for a while until they can start making a profit off of it. And I think that could happen for Jeff Bezos if he could get all the top promoters to work together and to have a boxing quality control guy who would say, you only get the budget. Now, you can all have, and I'll get to this later, I have other slides, you could all have still your individual shows, a PBC show, a Top Rank show, a Golden Boy show, a Matchroom USA show. But we control the budget, and every single year, on the dot, you are going to have to mix and match your best talent. And by the way, we got a taste of that last week. Now, Janabek popped for PEDs against Erislandy Lara, but Foster and Fulton did fight. And Sandor Martin and Alberto Puello did it on the Tank Roach card. So we've already seen PBC and Top Rank mix and match a couple of their fighters on these Amazon Prime shows. So it can be done. Again, the PS2, which is still the highest selling console in the history of video games, for the most part sold at a loss through much of its lifespan, okay? That doesn't mean Sony didn't wind up being successful. This is part of what Saudi is failing to do. They're trying to overspend on the market and lose money to eventually dominate the market, but I think they're playing right into TKO's hands. They're really just helping drive out competition, and then eventually when they're tired of hemorrhaging money, TKO can take over everything on the cheap. So again, there is a precedent for this in business where you lose money and then eventually make money. So now again, Ari, he backed the UFC deal, he backed the Paramount deal, he has his fingerprints all over this, right? Let me scroll down here a little bit in my notes. Okay, he had his fingerprints all over that. He was the agent of Donald Trump. So, of course, Donald Trump is saying, I don't know if Netflix can merge with Warner Brothers Discovery, even though Warner Brothers Discovery was quoted as saying, we've turned down 6 proposals over 12 weeks. We want to sell to Netflix, but the president might not let us. But you know who he will, you know who he's encouraging to do it? Is Paramount Skydance, and it makes sense because Ari was his agent. Now, Paramount Skydance, again, is controlled by David Ellison, right? Now, David Ellison made a promise to Trump that, hey, you let us go ahead and push this deal through, I got you on CNN. I'll make sure CNN doesn't talk that shit about you anymore, okay? So, of course, Trump is favoring them. Oh, and if that wasn't enough, geez, I thought I had this photo here somewhere. Forgive me, chat. Oh, here we go. Affinity Partners is who is trying to back it, right? Now, Affinity Partners is headed by his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, right? Who invests in American and Israeli companies. If you go back earlier in the video when I showed you those slides from Variety where they're showing Paramount and Netflix bidding on it, you'll see that Kushner's Affinity Group is also backed by Saudi, Abu Dhabi, and Qatar to try to make this bid for Warner Brothers, okay? Now, what a coincidence we have. Look who is right behind each other at 3rd and 4th for the richest men in the world. It's Jeff Bezos of Amazon Prime and Larry Ellison of Oracle, and who owns Paramount Skydance. So there's a lot of ironies here lining up. Bezos has history with, and actually on a separate note, Bezos' wife, Lauren Sanchez, he wound up taking her from Ari Emanuel's Endeavor business partner, Patrick Whitesell. Look it up. Patrick Whitesell was married to Lauren Sanchez, and she eventually left him for Jeff Bezos. Patrick Whitesell is to this day partners with Ari Emanuel at Heading Endeavor. So between the Saudi stuff with Khashoggi and that, and the fact that coincidentally these two multi-billionaire media empire heads, Bezos and Ellison, are neck and neck on the world's richest men league. So Jeff Bezos, get in there and compete against these people. Don't let them just take over and try to form a bigger and bigger acquisition of the media market. Get in there with your American dollars and compete against these people. You don't need Saudi backing. Your company is worth $2.5 trillion. It's worth almost $1 trillion more than the Saudi Aramco, the oil giant, right? So to keep it pushing, here it is again, right? Jared Kushner, in case you didn't believe me earlier, I shouldn't have said you had to look for the video earlier. Here's the receipt. Now, the private equity firm led by Jared Kushner, which is offering more money to Paramount, is backed by sovereign wealth funds. That means not private money. That means government money from Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Abu Dhabi, okay? And this is why Trump is about to have his show at the White House. It all lines up politically. It's deeper than just combat sports. It's deeper than just fighting, okay? The people that Dana's company, which is headed by Ari backed the Paramount Skydance merger. He's back. Paramount is now trying to go after Warner Brothers Discovery to appease Trump, to get his coverage of CNN taken off what he feels like is a bias. And it all is coming together and culminating this summer when the UFC enters the White House. Now, I was annoyed by a lot of the purple-haired college kids who I'll call commies too, right? A lot of them are commies. I hate commies. You know who else I hate? Fascists. Okay? I hate commies and I hate fascists. This is why I can't vote, people. Because on the right wing, you lean towards fascism. And on the left wing, you could become a commie. Okay? Just to be kind of funny but serious at the same time, right? So this is fascism. Fascism, I believe, is when the government is directly tied with corporations. Okay, so to give a nod to the annoying purple-haired college students from a couple years ago, they were right about this one, all right? Shout out to them on that. So now here we go. I started this tweet earlier to get people to come to the live. Thank all of you for coming to the live. And what I heard was tomorrow, Dana White, Nick Khan, and Terrence Crawford are headed to Texas for the Nationals, and the Nationals that I've been tweeting about this whole time, right? So eventually, like I said, that Saudi money could very well stop wanting to hemorrhage money. DAZN could want to stop having losses, and then where will all these promoters who have hitched their wagons to the Saudi money, to DAZN, where will they go? Well, they might be, obsolete by then, and the next crop of stars from USA Boxing, which is the lifeblood of American boxing. That's where all our great fighters have come from Devin Haney to Shakur Stevenson to Teofimo Lopez to Sugar Ray Leonard. I've already said it all, but that's where they come from, right? And that's why they're flying out there tomorrow. Now, I did sound the alarm. I did rush this video as I was working on it all week because I said, oh shit, they might try to buy the rights tomorrow, and even if it's futile, I got to make this video at the last second. Well, it turns out, talking to my sources around USA Boxing, that they do have to go through a chain of command. They can't just finish and finalize a deal for those rights tomorrow, right? They would have to go through a board of directors and a process, but they're flying out there tomorrow to take their first big step towards acquiring USA Boxing's rights fees, okay? And to be fair to USA Boxing, they've received no attention and resources for them. I mean, Top Rank had a good history of signing the top flight amateurs and Olympians straight to their company. But outside of that, you hardly see any coverage, any backing of USA Boxing. And so they're in a position where maybe selling out to TKO looks like the right idea to do, especially when they have Paramount. And if they were to stream the Nationals, that would be a great look for boxing that's been sorely missing. There's a reason why Oscar De La Hoya and Sugar Ray Leonard and Evander Holyfield and all these guys, why their pro debuts were nationally televised. It's because they were already stars on American television from the Olympics and the amateur program. Now, that being said, USA Boxing, though, has done less than the bare minimum. If you look at their YouTube channel, they have 19,000 subscribers almost, okay? And they don't post any of their content. They have the Nationals right now. I've been tuning in. I've been tweeting about it. I've been watching Marcus Luther in the 143-pound division, Salim Ellis Bey, a heavyweight, a 198-pounder who will be a heavyweight by the time he's a pro, that I interviewed here on the channel, Joseph Awinonya Jr., who is a tremendous talent. We got so much talent that constantly pours through USA Boxing, but they get no attention. Yes, through the fault of the people in the pros, from us in the media, to the promoters themselves, but also because USA Boxing, they have a deal that keeps their fights, like the Nationals, locked behind an antiquated 2008 type of website with a zoomed out camera, with a static view, no commentary, really just the bare minimum. And it's not even on YouTube, where, trust me, content creators, they're making millions of dollars off boxing and abroad. So it can be done. My pitch to USA Boxing would be, instead of selling out to TKO, why don't you go ahead and start putting your best foot forward to build your own YouTube channel up, which has made people millions of dollars, like Jake Paul, Logan Paul. They made millions of dollars. Look, I even have an idea for them. I don't work for Fight Hype anymore, but I know that Fight Hype, Fight Hub, some of these big channels with 1 million plus subscribers, almost 2 million plus subscribers, they'd be more than happy to stream these tournaments on their channel. And I know me and several other people that love boxing would even commentate these fights for free, or for literally the price of the flight and the hotel it costs to go out there, or if not free, I would do it for free. And what you could do then is eventually use these platforms with millions of subscribers to build your own USA Boxing subscriber count up to a certain point, and then you could tell them all to kick rocks. Say, all right, we got it from here. Say by the 2028 Olympics, you follow that plan, and USA Boxing, which, by the way, they're sitting on a gold mine of archived footage. They have in Colorado Springs all the tapes of Floyd Mayweather. They have, for example, my man Sean Porter fighting Alexander Usyk in the amateurs buried somewhere. You could post all that content and it would get hundreds of thousands, if not millions of views, and generate tons of revenue to that channel. And within a few years, you could reach 1 million subscribers by the 28 Olympics. And then you could say, thank you, Fight Hype, thank you, Fight Hub, and these other people that helped us establish these tournaments with viewership, and we got it from here now. And then that gold mine you're sitting on, you don't need to sell it out to TKO. You just need to take better advantage of it. And look, the proof is in the pudding. Little old me with 12,000 followers got 33,000 views for Marcus Luther's knockout the other day. When I covered Joseph Awignonya Jr., it got almost 60,000 views. And that's with these kids having no promotion, nothing. Just me, some boxing journalist being like, hey, check them out. And look, it got tons of engagement on Twitter. Imagine if USA Boxing streamed on YouTube in collaboration with some of these big boxing channels, the Nationals, the Junior Olympics, which I attended back in June. It could be a huge gold mine. And I know all you guys out there would love to see Floyd Mayweather's amateur fights, love to see James Toney, Roy Jones's amateur fights, so on and so Oscar's amateur fights, their national tournaments, the finals of these tournaments. That alone can build their subscriber base to the millions. And then streaming the tournaments themselves, same thing. So my pitch to USA Boxing, I'm sorry you haven't got the coverage you deserve, although you like to freeze us out a little bit. I did try to go to I went to the JOs, posted a few full fights. I got copyright flagged because they said, hey, that's our footage, which I understand. But if you're going to do that, don't keep it locked behind an antiquated 2008 style website. Go ahead and give these kids the shine they need. There could be kids in the amateurs who have talent that grow disenfranchised because no one cares about them, kind of thing. And if you give these kids more shine, think the NCAA football and NCAA college basketball and football. Billions of dollars of revenue in their own right. Not even the professionals like NFL and NBA. They make tons of money because they do what they can to take that wonderful talent they have that will inevitably go to the pros and give them the exposure they need. So I would recommend that to USA Boxing. Please, if you're listening to me, rather than selling out to TKO, who, hey, history repeats itself, okay? Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. They've already showed their hand with with this antitrust $375 million they've had to pay out, and they got 2 more pending. So you know what they're trying to do to these kids. So that brings me back to the big 4. Okay? Here's my pitch to them after I just pitched USA Boxing. My pitch to them is, look, ESPN or Top Rank, their deal ran out this year. They have no network. Xander Zayas is fighting in a unification January 31st, the same night as T.O. versus Shakur, but they have no network. They still have talent. They have Keyshawn Davis. They have Abdullah Mason. They have Xander Zayas. They have Richard Torres, who's in a good fight against Frank Sanchez, but they have no network. So I would say join Amazon Prime. You already had Oshaki Foster win a fight on Amazon Prime against Stephen Fulton. Join Amazon Prime. Now, next would be Oscar, right? Now, this is a little shaky, a little murky. Dan Rafael on Fight Freaks reported an extension in 2022, but some reports say it's 5 years. Some reports say it was only 2 or 3 years, which would mean the deal is expired and he has no official extension with DAZN. Now, Oscar, talking about redheaded stepchild, he's the redheaded stepchild of DAZN. He takes a backseat to Turkey, and then after that, Eddie Hearn and even Frank Warren having shows on there. So Oscar, who is having Ryan Garcia fight Mario Barrios on Amazon Prime. He's already sending his biggest star to Amazon Prime, And one of the biggest gates that in the top that made the top 10 was Ryan against Gervonta, which was a PBC Golden Boy fight. Oscar also sent Jaime Munguia over to Amazon Prime to fight Canelo, and they did good numbers there. They actually outperformed. I gotta check again, but they may have actually outperformed UFC that night. Can't remember. Anyways, they were competitive, so be competitive. Put on PBC top ranked Golden Boy fights. So Golden Boy's deal could be up already, and they don't have an extension. So join Amazon Prime. And Oscar, you won a gold medal for Team USA. Come on, man. Do you really want to sell out to the Saudis forever while they're still in court with 9/11? I know you probably hate Al Haymon. You feel swindled back over 10 years ago when much of your talent, except Canelo, went over to PBC. Let bygones be bygones, man. This is the 12th hour. What I'm getting at is join or die for all of you. And even Eddie Hearn, who I'll get to in a minute, who I remember I told Eddie earlier this year, he said, I would clean His Excellency's shoes if I had to. I said, Eddie, that's a bit much, isn't it? And I got love for Eddie Hearn. When I had a seizure at Canelo Jacobs back in 2019, Eddie Hearn got on the mic and wished me well at the press conference. So I like Eddie Hearn. I'm fond of Eddie Hearn. But instead of cleaning his shoes for a guy who already showed you his hand, Eddie, he already told you that he's aligning with Dana and they're going to crush everything. Everything includes you too, okay? So for Eddie Hearn, this was reported on Boxing Scene just this week, a few days ago, that he expects Matchroom to extend that DAZN broadcast deal, where it's, quote, likely, but it's not official yet. So Eddie, consider what I'm saying here before you ink that extension with DAZN, which again loses money, and the guy that's going to be paying you already has guys like Rick Reno shit on you at press conferences, already told you that Dana White is the head of the league that will crush everything. He already told you, believe him when he talks to you, Eddie. So where can they all go? On Amazon Prime Video, the only platform with the revenue backing it that can compete with these people, okay? And again, remember, what this will give, to take it back to the amateurs, right? Look at these antitrust suits. You need, the big four, they need an ecosystem to compete with TKO Paramount, right? The four of them, along with Amazon, they can still operate under the current Ali Act because TKO is going to be able to pass their revisions to it and establish their UBO model. Remember, Arum said, go ahead and do it. Just follow the actual rules of the original Ali Act. That was Arum's contention. So go ahead and make the UBO. So we're talking about the amateurs and everything here, right? The amateurs coming out will have a choice to make. Do you want to join TKO Paramount, who has this history of them? Or do you want to join the big four on Amazon Prime, who have gotten, between the four of them, Anthony Joshua, Canelo Alvarez, Floyd Mayweather, Oscar De La Hoya himself, and so many more paid and made wealthy? And which one do you want? Amateurs coming out of USA Boxing, you want to join? You could get with this or you could get with that. Do you want to join TKO Paramount when TKO's history is this? Or do you want to join Eddie Hearn, who made Anthony Joshua a rich man? Do you want to join Oscar De La Hoya, who under Bob Arum became a rich man and then became a richer man, fighting for himself in his own promotional company, and then made Canelo a very rich man who got richer with Haymon and Hearn? Or do you want to fight under Haymon, who made Floyd Mayweather very rich? I just saw Cruz and Roach flashing their ice at their last fight. That fight was a great fight. They made a lot of money. They're well fed. The choice, as Black Sheep would said, then again, the choice is yours. So that's my pitch to them. And here it is. Oh, damn. I don't know why it's so blacked out, but join or die, okay? This was made by Benjamin Franklin, a cartoon in the 1700s before the American Revolutionary War, and it was used again during the American Revolutionary War. And as you see here, even though unfortunately the photo is blacked out for some reason, I don't know why, New England, New York, New Jersey, these are proud promoters. I'm not asking you all to merge. I'm not asking you to do what all these other people are doing and make these mergers and acquisitions. I'm asking that you do what happened on HBO. You consolidate under a network and mix and match your best fighters to give boxing. Think about Eddie Hearn with Jaron Ennis, Bam Rodriguez, Al Haymon with David Benavidez, eventually Gervonta Davis, if he can get his act back together, and his talent. Bob Arum with Keyshawn Davis, Eddie Hearn again with Richardson Hitchens, Oscar De La Hoya with Ryan Garcia and Virgil Ortiz, And imagine them all mixing and matching like it used to be in the heyday, the 80s and the 90s, in the early 2000s at HBO, which is what we all miss, right? That's when HBO was the heart and soul of boxing, okay? And what I'm worried about is that not that TKO can't succeed, not that if TKO has their way, they won't ultimately take boxing to a level it's been lacking at the last decade plus, right? I don't doubt that. What I doubt is that boxing will lose. What I do think is boxing will lose its soul, okay? All you got to do, and I should have included in the slide, do a favor for me, everybody watching. Go on your phone and go into YouTube and go ahead and put in WWE TKO. Just those two things together. WWE TKO. What you're gonna see is 10 videos at least in a row to start the search results saying how TKO ruined WWE. WWE ruined TKO. TKO's WWE is awful, etc., etc. Why is that? Because all that corporate, that's not boxing. See, when Max, and I love Max, I respect Max, but when Max was trying to say boxing needs to be like NBA, NFL, UFC, he got booed at that press conference at Canelo Crawford where I went at Dana about the Ali Act, right? It's because part of boxing's cockamamie bullshit, Wild West bullshit is its charm. It's a different vibe than those three-letter conglomerates. And that's what TKO is, a three-letter conglomerate. And they will be successful if they have their way, okay? They will. They will bring some well-oiled machinery to the sport of boxing that is desperately lacking that and does need some of it, no doubt. But they'll lose part of the heart and soul of the sport, in my opinion, right? So what I'm proposing, because you see the Italian colors here, right? All right. Now I don't want organized crime going on, but is the 5 families, or in this case, I guess the 4 families. Okay, you need a commission. You need a commission of the 4 families. All right, and you need to mix and match and do business with each other to form this union. And just like join or die, you could still be separate, but form this union of American boxing under Jeff Bezos' Amazon Prime, okay? PBC could still have their own shows. Top Rank could still have their own shows. Matchroom and Golden Boy to build their young talent, because that's one. So you still need to build your own talent, feed them some easy fights on the way up, development fights before they're ready to just be thrown in championship level fights. But what Amazon would need is quality control. They would need someone to oversee that, to make sure that, hey, you want these budgets, you want these paydays, you're going to have to put on the right kind of fights and mix and match between each other. And we could have what everybody's been asking. The reason why we're in this predicament is these guys wouldn't do it on a consistent basis. The 12th hour is here. You're all going to get muscled out. You have to be honest with yourselves. You can't compete against this machine called TKO Paramount, okay? Unless you join forces under Amazon Prime. That's my pitch. That's what I genuinely believe, okay? So the 5 families, and just to conclude, because I don't want people to think all this going at the Saudi PIF and having a heavy hand and bringing up Jamal Khashoggi and 9/11 and all that. I don't want people to think I'm xenophobic or have anything against Islam. I don't. Bernard Hopkins is my favorite fighter ever. Bernard believes in Islam. That's fine, man. We're in America. You're supposed to have freedom of religion, right? But it's not just that. It's not just Saudi's international influence. To close, Benjamin Emanuel, Ari Emanuel's father. And remember, you can't think about Dana. You can't think about Nick Khan. The most powerful man really involved in all this, along with the Ellisons and Jared Kushner, is Ari Emanuel, okay? And Ari, his father, was a part of the Irgun, a Zionist parliament military group that operated in Palestine during the 30s and 40s. Albert Einstein was a pretty smart guy. What Albert Einstein said in 1948 to the New York Times is that the Irgun was a, quote, Nazi and fascist party, a terrorist right-wing chauvinist organization. Now, I'm sorry to be so heavy-handed. I'm not saying Ari Emanuel is all those things, but Israel has as much influence in this potentially. Ari, like Jared Kushner, has a dual loyalty here to both Israel and the United States, okay? So it's not just foreign influence from Saudi Arabia. I'm not just picking on them. And shout out to my man Bob Arum, okay? I never want to be confused as anti-Semitic or anti-anything. Bob Arum is Jewish, and this is who I'm backing to do it. But Bob Arum is a proud American who served under Robert F. Kennedy years before he got assassinated. And And also, forgive me here for a minute. Yeah, and also, not only did Bob Arum serve under Robert F. Kennedy, he's the one that organized Muhammad Ali getting his license reinstated. He organized a young Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Jim Brown, and Muhammad Ali. So when Bob Arum writes to Congress to defend the honor of the Ali Act, he's not just defending a fighter he promoted, he's defending his friend in Muhammad Ali, okay? And he's not going along with all of TKO's business about this. He's doing the right thing. He's fighting the right fight. Fellas, boxing, I'm asking USA Boxing, sanctioning bodies like the WBC, and the four men and their companies I'm speaking of, to act with a sense of urgency and a sense of honor. And like my fellow Brooklynite said, Spike Lee, do the right thing, okay? That's what I'm asking them to do, all right? So that's that. I want to give a shout out to Bob Arum and all my Jewish friends too. You know, I guys love you. Nothing personal there at that end part of it. But we all got to face our facts. All right. I'm Italian, German, Irish. I'm proud to be Italian and German and Irish. I'm not proud of Germany, circa 1942. And I'm not saying what Ari is doing, trying to consolidate more and more American media, is nearly the equivalent of what they did. Let me be perfectly clear here, there too. But what I'm saying is, that shouldn't be used to stop someone like me from speaking the truth about all this situation. So, again, in conclusion, I'm asking those four parties to join or die and to do right by the sport, do right by themselves, really, and to do the right thing, like my man Spike Lee said. So, for your man Sean Zittel, that's all I got for tonight. I'm tired. My voice sucks. I know it was choppy in the beginning, but I think we caught a rhythm as we went along. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I hope the Big Four all watch this, and I hope boxing at the 12th hour gets his shit together, or else the revolution will be televised on Paramount. And I know that's what a lot of people want anyways, but I'm offering up a solution. I've done all this complaining, right? And pissing and moaning for the last 12 to 18 months about all this. Well, that's my pitch. Go to Jeff Bezos, you four gentlemen, get him in a meeting room, tell him everything I've told you, and see if he wants to invest further into the sport of boxing to give us the fights on a consistent basis that we want to see, and to stop TKO from potentially exploiting the next generation of fighters coming out of the amateur system. That's all I got for tonight. God bless. Merry Christmas, happy holidays, and